I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. I'm Lynn Epina for the League of Women Voters of Laramie. And I'd like to thank Rock River's Andrea Lamb for her assistance in helping us get this set up. Tonight's forum is for the Republican nomination for House District 47 in the Wyoming Legislature. And before we get started, I'd like to go over some general information and forum procedures. As a courtesy to everyone, first of all, your cell phones, please turn them to silent or completely off. You're not allowed to do any recording. We are recording the whole thing, and it will be posted on our the League of Women Voters website. On the side tables, on the side tables we have brochures regarding, this side table is for the League, and here we have candidate information. And if you enjoy these forums and are interested in what we've got over there for the League, please think of joining. There are membership forms over there as well. The primary election is August 21st, and polling places are open from 7 to 7. You may vote early by completing a ballot at the county clerk's office or request an absentee ballot through the county clerk through August 21st. Election information can be obtained from the county clerk's website or from the Wyoming Secretary of State's website. If you're not registered to vote or need to change voter information, you may do so at the county clerk's office through August 6th. If you need you'll need a picture ID to make that happen. You may also register or change your registration after August 1 through August 21. If you also cast an absentee ballot at that time. You may register or change your registration at the polling place on election day. So if you have special needs, voting accommodations, and aids are available at each polling place and at the clerk's office. The election judges can assist you, and you can contact the clerk's office to make the arrangements in advance. In addition to voting for the elected officials during this primary election, a 1% specific purposes tax is also on the ballot. Voters are asked to vote simply for or against the tax. A flyer explaining the projects to be funded was sent out with utility bills. There is a version up there, and we have some extra.
Laramie's utility bills.
Huh?
Laramie's utility bills. Yes, Jackie Gonzalez will be sending out ballot information, but not the flyer.
Okay, well, we've got copies, if you're not from Laramie. So, let's see, there are sample ballots in the table back there. Please don't take them, there are only copies. And they're, the League of Women Voters has a voter's guide that people have asked us about so far at every forum, and that'll be coming out Sunday, August 5th. The voter's guide will be posted on the League website, and there'll be other copies available at the Albany County Library, the clerk's office, and other locations around Laramie. At this time, I'd like to introduce our stellar crowd. We have, I think, 8 candidates for offices other than the one that will be in the forum. Let me just start with the first one I wrote down, Maura. James, if you'd like to say something, introduce yourself and say something briefly.
My name is Maura Hanning, and I'm running for Albany County Commissioner as a Democrat. And I guess one of my main goals is to protect our high-quality water supply.
Thank you. Sorry. J and H. Leanne Stevenson.
I'm Leanne Stevenson. I live in Riverside. I'm running for Senate District 11 as a Democrat. I've lived in Riverside for about 11 years. I come from Cheyenne with a background in social services, child protection, domestic violence, corrections, community corrections, and I'm really interested in criminal justice reform. I'm also interested in victims' rights and preserving the services for our seniors.
Thank you. Peggy Trent.
Hi, I'm Peggy Trent, and I currently serve as your Albany County and Prosecuting Attorney. I'm running for my second term, and in 2014, when I ran for office, I made several commitments to the community of Albany County, and I'm proud to say I fulfilled each of those commitments, including changing the way we treat children in our juvenile justice system, Also addressing how we are handling prosecutions and just the efficiency of our office. I'm looking forward to serving a second term. It's my intent to move forward with what some of the initiatives we've done with our community as it relates to juveniles, namely working to form a juvenile drug court, as well as working and addressing the issues that are facing our aging population, along with just in general the increase in opioids and what we're seeing in our community, and doing better ways of handling drug offenses and how we prosecute. Thank you.
Terry Jones.
Hi, I'm Terry Jones, and I'm currently one of your county commissioners. I am not running at this time because I'm in the next cycle. When I ran, I definitely wanted to make sure that we maintain private property rights, and we work to make sure that we have clean water, and most importantly, that we follow the law.
Okay. That off.
One more.
No, he's behind you.
We've got-
Hi, I'm Thad Hoff. I'm currently running for Albany County Commissioner as well. I, for the last 15 years, have owned and operated a locksmith company out of Laramie. I've actually done the locks on this building and do quite a bit of work up north end of the county. So it's not unfamiliar to me. My, I guess, campaign points are I'd like to see the county a little farther out of the real estate business and economic development turned over to the private sector more than the government interest. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Now, Klaus.
Yep. My name is Klaus Halsgett. I'm running for County Commissioner for Albany County. I'm new at this, but I have run a business in Laramie for over 27 years. I'd like to bring what I've learned from my business to Albany County, not just Laramie, but the whole county. Like everybody here, I don't think anybody's in favor of dirty water. We're all in favor of clean water, and I would agree with that. But I'm also wanting to try to help agriculture and the ranchers in Albany County, see if there's things we can do to make agriculture even more successful than what it is. It is one of our biggest industries in this county. And we've got a rough go. We are a very, very poor county in a poor state at this point in time. According to USA Today Money Edition, Albany County's government is the poorest in the whole state. So I'm hoping to bring some of my fiscal responsibility from running a business to the commission, and we'll see how it's going to be a rough road. But I'm looking forward to it, and I've always accepted challenges. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Right now, maybe to the state level, we have Kurt Meyer.
Oh, hi. Thanks for inviting us here, and thanks to the League of Women Voters. A quick sideline, what I've done for Albany County. I've worked tirelessly to make sure that you stay in the hardship formula for local governmental funding. I think that's really helped you guys, and so I understand the formulas in that. I've had 8 years on appropriations, 10 years on the state retirement system, and that's probably why next week you'll hear that the Wyoming public employers are going to endorse me, because I think they know that I understand investments. Now, that's the biggest problem that we have right now. We're not getting enough out of our investments, and state treasurers need about 9. Retirement system's getting over 14. Personally, I have gotten 17.66% on my returns since 1989. So I know what I'm doing. I've lived here my whole life. I've been in business for 36 years. I believe in the future of the state. I believe in your guys' future and what we can do. And we want to make sure that our investments work hard for us so we don't have to worry about taxes, and we fund education.
Mr. Meyer, did you state the office that you're running?
State treasurer.
Thank you.
All right, Bill.
Because that leaves me.
I guess we've got one more.
Okay. Looks like most of everybody's running for office, held office, or is in office. And my name's Bill Dolan. I was born and raised in Sheridan, Wyoming. That's the north part of the state.
No, none of us know that.
I'm a businessman. One of my businesses, I sell coal. And in selling coal, it's just not, you can look me up and fix you up for Christmas. But the thing about coal is it's very different. I find a user on one end that has an antiquated system. And that system is not efficient. The rail cars may freeze, they may have issues. I'll come in and put in a better, more efficient system. And in doing that, I'll go back and I will negotiate with coal companies. So, and then the rail rate. So all the transportation, logistics, and the coal are all part of my background. That being said, I understand the coal business is going to be flat for the next 20 years or so. It's going to be about probably 300 to 400 million tons of coal sold in the state. We need to diversify our economy. We need to strengthen our economy. And one example I give on a regular basis, Kurt can back me up on this, is industrial hemp. And I encourage you to look up industrial hemp. It can grow here in Albany County. If you want to read an article about it, look up the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. It was about the May 24th, 26th edition. Came out about hemp. And what it, in Oregon they use as an example, is taking down the, taking down the marijuana crops because they got a glut. There's too much of it. So what they're going to is industrial hemp with the hope of 100,000 for the grower, 100,000 an acre. That's just one example. There's many examples. I go into fiscal responsibility and a lot of other things, but I got 30 seconds and I don't have time to share them all with you. I appreciate all of you here and appreciate your vote August 21st or before.
Mr. Don, did you state the office that you're running for?
I'm running for governor.
Thank you.
My apologies. I had a sign.
And thank you for being so prompt here. We have one last, do you want to say anything about your candidate? Well, a few things.
Hello,
first.
everybody. My name is Kevin. This is Cortez. We're here on behalf of Foster Freeze. He is running for governor as a Republican, just like Mr. Dallin over here. He is a longtime resident of Wyoming. He is one of the top 10 investors for the 20th century. So he knows his way around finances. He sold his business about 17 years ago, so he's totally free of other commitments. He's the only candidate who can say that. And so we're really looking forward to giving back to the community. He's not going to be taking a salary. Instead, he'll be donating it to charities across the state of Wyoming, which totals to about $425,000 over the course of 4 years, which is the only amount he's going to run for. He intends to run for one term and one term only, because he wants to keep things fresh in the state of Wyoming. He believes in economic diversification. He believes in improving the public education system, among many other things. If you guys have any questions when it's an appropriate time, feel free to come up to either of us and ask. We'll be here until it's over. And thank you guys again so much for putting this event on.
All right, well, thank you. There will be an opportunity at the end of this forum for all of you to mingle and talk to one another, ask questions. Questions for the candidates are to be written down and submitted at any time. If you've got a question, just raise your hand and one of the women from the league will come around and pick it up. Please
Speaking of Foster, he is here now.
Oh my goodness.
Dramatically entry.
I have to film that.
All right.
This is campaigning.
Come on, come on.
Yeah, do a little intro for you.
There he is.
Mr. Freeze, your campaign staff has spoken for you already, but please just identify yourself and tell us what office you're running for.
They're much better than I am. I can just leave. Do you want me to start it, or?
Just give us your name and the office.
I am Foster Freeze, the first, and I would love to be your governor for the wonderful state of Wyoming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. In any case, back to the questions for the forum. You've got pads of paper and pencils. You can write your questions on that. The timekeeper, we'll let you know how many minutes you have remaining to speak.
We need the candidates up there.
Yes, we do need our candidates. What are our candidates? It's time, I guess. respond to each of the
90
questions.
minutes, that's
No,
a
sorry.
long time.
Sorry, 90
We're gonna be here for a while.
90 seconds to respond to each question. Robin will let you know when to start and when you've got 60 or 30 seconds left. Our moderator tonight, Ann Alexander. Ann is an associate vice provost at the university for undergraduate education. She's also an economist. She moved to Wyoming about 25 years ago, and the focus of her work in economics has been policy work that's related importance of the state. She's also been an American Association for the Advancement of Science Fellow at the U.S. Department of State, and with UW's international program, she was the director for a while. And she does all these things because things that matter to Wyoming matter to her. All right. I think that's all I have to say for Ann.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, I'll stand up every once in a while to ask a question. I only have 5 here, so I would appreciate more. If anybody has one, please let one of the league members know. I have a few that I can use for backups, but let's start off with the easiest one. Tell us who you are, what your name is, identify yourself, and give us some of your background that helps us understand what qualifies you for this position. Let's have Julie go first.
All right. My name is Julie McAllister. I live here in Rock River, Wyoming. I was not lucky enough to be raised or born in Wyoming. I didn't have a say in that, obviously. Turned 18, worked 1 more year to help out my mother, and came home. Went to the University of Wyoming. I have a degree in poli-sci, a master's in public administration, and I've actually lived in Rock River since 2002 and stayed here. I actually own the double shop that's closed across the street over there. A little bit about what qualifies me for office. I've literally spent my entire life, and I know a lot of you are looking at me thinking that's not a whole lot of life, solving problems after they were broken, dealing with the mess after a catastrophe. That's literally the story of my life. I can repeat stories to you that would boggle your mind that I've dealt with and I'm tired of it. The only way I know to do anything about it is put my money where my mouth is and run for office, get active, be proactive, and try to get to these problems before they're absolute catastrophe. There's always warning signs, and then it seems like no one does anything. And then everyone goes, I told you so. And no one does anything. No one does anything. And I'm tired of it. That's really why I'm running. What qualifies me to deal with it? If I can deal with the havoc after it's blown up, I can certainly see through to try and mitigate our direction we're going, solve some of these problems, deal with some things before the catastrophe. One example where Wyoming's done a nice job is the rainy day fund. We boom and bust out here. We know this. Everyone knows it about us. So we're starting to deal with that. We have been for a while. But that doesn't mean we can't do more. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the purposes of taking up pictures, it's easier for us to sit, for you, if we sit down and...
That's fine, because I felt really tall.
Yes, I would be happy if you both sat, but I thought that the people in the back row deserved a chance to see you, since they came.
I'm Jerry Paxton. I live over at encampment, Riverside, I guess. Leanne's back in the back room. I better get the proper town there. I'm a native, 5th generation Wyomingite. I was raised up in the Bighorn Basin area. Have an ag background. Was in the, graduated from Manderson Hyattville High School. If you've been around Wyoming, you may know where that is. Otherwise, you probably don't. I went into the Army, was a military policeman in the Army. Getting out of the Army, I started school at the University of Wyoming. Got a degree in ag education and started teaching at encampment 47 years ago, and then became the school principal over there in the K-12 school. And upon retirement, I decided to run for county commissioner, did that for 6 years, and then I've been 6 years in the state legislature. Before that, I was also mayor and town councilman in Riverside, and the mayor and town council of Riverside. So I've been through the gamut from the lower levels up to, well, maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure which is the lowest level.
All right, thank you very much. So we have had a number of questions come in. I appreciate that. So I'll go to one that just came in, a very good one that I'd love to hear the answer to from each of you. And we're going to alternate back and forth. So Mr. Paxton, you will be first this time. The question is, this is a large district. How do you plan to adequately represent the variety of interests in this district?
Well, I've been representing this district for the past 6 years, and I can tell you it really is a challenge to get around from one side to the other. It's over 12,000 square miles. For me to go up to Farson, round trip's 418 miles round trip. But I think the key to it is just get acquainted with key people in each one of the communities that can kind of keep you informed. Make as many trips to those communities as you can whenever there's an event in that area. Make sure that they realize that you are there to represent them and that you're available. Make sure that your contact information is given out so that they can know who you are. The main thing is that you just need to make people feel comfortable about being able to contact you and know that whether it's be by telephone or via email or text message or whatever method we choose, that we are available and we are responsive to the needs of the people in each one of these different communities.
It's a big district with varied interests. I'm going to address this in 2 parts. One, dealing with the size of this district. 2, dealing with the varied interests. 1, I do agree with Mr. Paxton. You need to spend your time on the road and talking to people, spending time with them, making sure they know they can speak with you. You're going to answer their questions. You're going to respond and be a resource, not a dead wall where problems go to stop. That's a major challenge when you have all these square miles, and that's just a matter of getting up and doing it. It's just a job, just got to get after it. The varied interest struggles a lot more. A lot of times, if you're just putting a vote in on something, it's a yes or a no. And I think that is going to be the second step of dealing with the size of the district, is dealing with the varied interests, which is going to be where my stating dead wall comes in there. Open the conversation up. Not every single thing you vote on, every single thing you say and do is going to make every single person in your district happy. That's not going to happen. It's unrealistic. But if you have an open dialogue where you can communicate with your voters and your constituents so they understand what your position was, what the issue was, and why you went the direction you went, you're going to get a lot farther and probably get some good reciprocating information out of that conversation and that interaction with the constituent than you would if you just stonewalled them.
Next question, there's actually 2 parts to this, and Ms. McAllister, you will go first. What is the greatest financial need in House District 47? And part 2, what is the greatest non-financial need in the district?
It's a good question. I don't know who wrote that one. They did a good job. That one made me think. Greatest financial need in this district, in my opinion, and I'll state flat out it's an opinion, I'm not pulling this out of any data, is transparency.
It's what? Sorry?
Transparency in our budgeting. It's one of the most frustrating things. When the governor's budget comes out, other budgeting plans come out, there's absolutely no time for the legislature to do its due diligence. Voters, constituents, anyone living anywhere cannot go to an easily accessible resource and find out where their money's going. I don't think that's acceptable. You don't pay your utility bills and not know where the money went. You know how much you paid for this, this, and this. It makes sense to you, you can deal with it. It's not being dealt with in Wyoming, it's not being addressed, and when you get in talking with certain people who would be administering this, whether it be a clerk or someone else, they get a bit defensive about it. I don't see a single viable reason that they can say that. The greatest non-financial need in this district, honestly, is communication. Our counties don't even talk to each other. County commissioners in different counties might know each other personally, but not really well. We don't discuss things. We don't say, hey, what's working for you? What's not working for you? There's no communication. And to pull away from finances completely, that's going to be the point I'm going to bring out. You know, we all say we want diversification. We all say we need to work on our budgeting, but we don't have any real conversations going back and forth between counties, between districts, between school districts. We don't even have conversations going back and forth. They just know who each other are. And that doesn't make any sense to me on how we're getting anywhere, being proactive especially in solving problems and dealing with things if we're not communicating. Thanks.
I'd say probably the biggest concern of people in our district is to maintain our small schools. They're the lifeblood of each one of our little communities, and when you get into a budget situation like we've been in this past year, it certainly raises some questions, and there's always a question of whether or not consolidation of some of these schools could be financially beneficial. And I think we've probably proven that there isn't a lot of benefit to that. But it's kind of what the whole state of Wyoming is built on, these small communities. And so I'd say that was probably the number one, and to find the resources that we have to be able to keep these small schools open and keep them viable and make sure that they're getting the same quality of education in Rock River as they do in Cheyenne or Casper. And on the other side of things, I think that it's important that we stay in contact with the people in our communities. That means going to school board meetings. It means going to county commissioner meetings, council of governments meetings, town council meetings. All those things are extremely important. We are the conduit from the locals back to the state, and the best way to do that is to try to attend as many of these different meetings as you can from one end to the other. It's a huge job, and probably if I weren't retired, I wouldn't be able to do the kind of job that I've been able to do, but I think that's the main thing on the non-budget side.
All right, the next one is a little bit kind of related to the very first one about how large the district is. So Mr. Paxton, you will go first. Would you recommend redrawing the boundaries of this district, and if so, how?
Well, it certainly would be simpler, I think, if the boundaries were redrawn. And when the boundaries were drawn, for some reason or another, we excluded Rollins and Sinclair. And so I think that we could have made this a much smaller district. When you're covering 3 counties, that's a number of school districts that you have to cover. That's a number of county commissioners that you have to stay in contact with. Three counties is probably a little much. And so I think if I were going to redraw the district lines, I would take a look and see what we could do to include at least portions of either Rollins or Sinclair or both of them, so that we could make this a little bit smaller. But you know, it is what it is. We'll work with it, and it's not been overwhelming. It's just been a challenge to get to all the communities and cover them the way they need to be covered.
Would you please reread the question? I'm sorry, I'm really tired, so I'm stumbling.
That's all right. How would you recommend, or would you recommend redrawing the boundaries of this district, and if so, how?
Honestly, no. I wouldn't. It's a big district. It's really hard to campaign it. This is my 3rd go. It's a lot of work. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think redistricting should be done just on a whim. I think there needs to be cause, there needs to be actual reason, data to prove what needs to be done. So no, I wouldn't do it.
You start this next one. What are your thoughts on funding models for local governments? Ms. McAllister.
It's another big one. That's going to come back to my main issue with anything in budgeting in Wyoming is transparency of government monies. Every penny of it. I don't care if it's the smallest town in Wyoming or Casper or Cheyenne. We need to know where our money's going. There's no reason that any taxpayer shouldn't be able to look that information up and see down to the penny where it's gone and what it's done. Local governments especially, if we can get a small model down, why can't we build on it? That would be the easiest place to start. Smaller the better, and build it up. That's pretty much where I sit with that.
Well, I think the 99 towns and 23 counties that we have in Wyoming certainly do present some unique challenges. For us to find a way for the locals to be able to raise their own taxes, their own money, I think would be beneficial by vote of the people. When we took away the tax on food and didn't backfill it, I think that was a real hardship. We have been able to come up with some money, I think it was 105 million, 104 million, to help keep the towns and counties viable. So I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to continue that. In order to give the towns and counties a little more leeway, I'd like to see us find a mechanism where they can actually raise their own taxes. It seemed like to me that would make more sense at the local level.
Okay, well, speaking of local taxes, Mr. Paxton, you will go first. The question is, sales tax revenue has been consistently going down for the last couple of decades. Specifically, what can you do to reverse this trend?
Well, the main thing that we can do is that we now have the ability to tax online sales, and we're seeing more and more of that happening, especially in the rural communities, and we did pass a bill to enable that to happen as soon as the lawsuit was settled, and that lawsuit has now been settled. So if you do a lot of buying online, you're going to see some taxes being levied against that, and I think we'll be surprised at how much money that'll generate. I think it's going to be a huge source of revenue for the state of Wyoming, and just looking at some of the estimates that we've seen of how much that'll raise, it could make a significant difference in our budget. I think I don't think it's going to get any smaller as time goes on. It just seems like the convenience of being able to sit in your own living room and order exactly what you want seems to be a real deal. And for us that live out here in these rural areas where it's 50 or 60 miles to the nearest Walmart, well, it makes it pretty easy for us to do that. And I think that's going to be a big player in the future.
Sales tax revenue going down for me immediately makes my brain start to spin, honestly, as to why, what's going on here. Tourism is another thing that's incredibly important in this entire district and the state, and a big source of sales tax. But the other part of my mind also goes back to not just stimulating more tourism and bringing more tourists in, it also goes back to diversifying our economy a little bit. I know that everyone says it, but they don't do a whole lot about it. And I think that boils down to a lack of conversation with voters, constituents, and other people who are concerned about what you mean by diversifying, and they will throw the quotes up most of the time when they're concerned about it. The better off we're doing, the more money we spend. We know this. If you have extra money, you might save it, you might spend it. How do we get more people to spend money and encourage more sales tax? Well, people need to spend more money. Obviously, that's a duh. Well, how do we get them to spend more money? We make sure and do every step we can in government to free up our market, to offer new opportunities for businesses, incomes, good jobs, guaranteed income, where they have the ability to spend more money. It seems like a better way. It's the harder way, but it's also a more permanent solution.
Well, this is an easy one to address in 90 seconds. So, Ms. McAllister, what would your solution to the budget challenges of Wyoming be?
Meh. She said 90 minutes earlier.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But
I have a whiteboard and a marker. Can you repeat the question so I can answer as properly as possible? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to joke and waste time.
What is your solution to the budget challenges that Wyoming faces?
I thought it was that broad. Just wanted to see if there's anything in there I can needle in on. Okay, sorry. Budgeting challenges, back to transparency. I think I've talked enough about that. I touched a little bit on diversifying our economy. I'd like to bring it back to something else. Small thing I can do. Small thing I do. Be happy to prove. Every inch of my campaign money's been spent in-state. In-state mailing facilities, in-state printing facilities, in-state everything. Why can't we trust Wyoming a little more? Why can't we put a little more money, maybe even incentives in working with Wyoming businesses a little more? Why can't we do that? Why can't we look to that direction? We all love Wyoming. We have to love it to want to be here, to live here, to exist. We have to want to. Or be kept here. You got to want to be here. Why can't we trust Wyoming and put some more money back into what we have here already? There's another good budgeting idea. Transparency is another one. On top of transparency, the second step to that, I'm going to circle back around here, is solving the small problems. What do you do if you don't get the raise you were counting on at work, or you have to change jobs and you have less money? You cut your bills at home. You look at where you're wasting money. Maybe you get rid of cable and go to Netflix. That saves you a bunch. Why can't we look at our budget and government the same way? One place that's really easy and a lot of money gets wasted very often is administrative. Anything. It's a really good place to look to shore things up, to cut some money out of that, divert it other places that place needs. Not necessarily take their money away from an agency or whatever it may be you're looking at, but have them redirect that funding somewhere else where they have an area of need. Just working the actual problem, putting your time to do it the right way.
Well, first of all, I think we need to continue to look for efficiencies. We've already done a lot of looking in some of the different agencies. I think that you know, the budget constraints are not all bad, because it really does make you take a look at what's essential and what isn't essential. So I think there are some other things that we can continue to do to make each one of our departments more self-sufficient. We've already gone a long way down that road. But I think there's probably a little more to do that. But I think we also need to keep in mind that cuts have consequences. And so at what point in time do the consequences become so severe that we start to look at other sources of revenue? And that's for the people to tell me when they want to do that. Right now, there's no appetite for raising taxes. I'm on the Revenue Committee, which is maybe the most frustrating committee you could possibly be on this thing. We can't even pass a sin tax. We couldn't pass tax on cigarettes, and I think the beer tax goes back to 1934, doesn't it, Kurt? And it's still the same as it was back then. So difficult to raise any kind of taxes. I think that looking at diversifying our economy, of course, is important, and taking advantage of things like our potential wind farms that are coming in here that have potential to raise some tax revenue for us. The online sales, as I mentioned before, help us. Improving our infrastructure by looking at our broadband, especially for these small communities where people can telecommute, live anywhere. Enough.
She's a little intimidating when she throws a stop up at you, isn't she? And she looks at you too. Like, no.
She's got that teacher face.
She does.
Teacher face.
Mom face.
It's really useful.
So I'm going to have to look through those, so I'm going to go pitch over to one of my questions here. Mr. Paxton, you are first. Tell us your thoughts on Endow and the direction that it's been headed and where you think it should go.
Well, you know, I think that the Endow program certainly is an effort to take a look at where we need to be down the road a ways, and to give us an opportunity to not be so dependent on the mineral extraction industry, which is a good thing. I'm not sure, we're probably too early in the whole process to really draw any hard and fast conclusions of where that's going to take us. I think that a key to that whole process is who do we elect governor, and where are they going to take us down the road on that program? Is that going to be the end of it, or are we going to continue the process as we move forward? Again, the infrastructure thing that's part of that is important. One of the real controversial things that we see is trying to improve the transportation in and out of the state of Wyoming, and it's pretty hard to get air service in places in small communities, and so I don't know how that's going to work out. We'll see how it works out as we move forward, but certainly looking for every opportunity to expand and diversify has to be key to the whole process. But too early in the Endow process to draw any real conclusions, in my opinion.
I was happy to see something done along the lines of Endow. I'm a little personally concerned about the amount of money that's going into it. But again, do we absolutely have to move away from minerals? I don't know. I'll admit that. I don't know. But we do need to look to diversifying. We need to look at what else we can offer, who else we can bring in, what other directions we can move as a state. And I'm happy to see something being done about that. And I do agree with Jerry. It's going to depend a lot on who the very competitive governor's race has the opportunity to take that position for the next 4 years. It's really something that's interesting. There's a lot to say on it, and I'm going to stop myself there because I'll admit also I actually was researching Endow the other day and stopped before I should have to answer this question competently. So I'm going to do something that's probably a bit rare, and I really don't care because I'd rather tell the truth than lie. That's about all I know for sure and will admit to. I have more research to do. But if any of you guys know a lot more than me, and I'd be more than happy to hear what you have to teach me.
Okay. We'll have you go first again. Ms. McAllister, do you think UW can contribute more to the economic development of Albany County? For example, should they pay property taxes?
Should the University of Wyoming pay property taxes when so much money from our state already goes to the university, so we want a little bit of it back? Couldn't we just cut their budget and save a check and a stamp? It seems a little silly to me. I like the idea behind the question of contributing back, and as someone who's been to university, and I'm sure many of you and some of you that I know have went to the University of Wyoming, know that one thing that happens down there is they kind of operate as their own entity. They do operate as their own entity. I personally think that not only would Albany County and the state of Wyoming benefit from more interaction, even even if not especially financial interaction. But the university would benefit as well. They don't need to be this closed system, University of Wyoming. They don't have to be that way. They could open up and have more collaboration with different towns, collaborations for different degree programs, maybe more practical training with local professionals in the area. My brain's just running on this one, and I'll admit that too. I'm honest, I know I shouldn't be running to be a politician, sorry, can't help it. Mother raised me that way. We should be doing more. I don't know the property taxes is the answer, but I like the idea of thinking of moving that direction with the university and maybe seeing what resistance is met when that idea is really proposed and pushed upon them to see what problems they would give you another recourse and get that conversation going. I don't know the property tax is the way to go with it, but we could look at it.
Well, I don't see any real point in charging property tax. I mean, the cost of that would be transferred off to the students, and I just don't see any practical reason to do that. So no purpose there. I think the University of Wyoming does a great job. If I could change anything about the university, I think, since we only have one four-year institution in the state, it's important that we give our kids every opportunity we can. And we've done in the last few years, they've done a really good job of coordinating with our community colleges to do a 2+2 program to assure that when a student moves from community college into the university, that those credits transfer. I personally have paid for credits in the community college that didn't transfer to the university. It's not, as a parent, not a good deal. But I would like to see some expansion of some four-year opportunities, especially maybe to look at Riverton and giving our kids on the reservation an opportunity to start out maybe with elementary education, so that those kids, we can educate kids, the Native American kids that might want to go back out on that reservation, and they're real reluctant to leave that place. And so I'd like to see us be able to offer a four-year program through the university at some of our community colleges. Let's start with Riverton. I think that'd be a good start.
All right, next question. Mr. Paxton, you will go first. Do you see problems in the current legislature, for example, people, procedures, or anything else?
Well, that's a difficult problem.
In 90 seconds.
In 90 seconds. Well, I don't know what the problems are, what exactly that is intended by that question, but certainly the 6 years that I've been serving in the Wyoming State Legislature, this was the most contentious session that I've been in, and a lot of it, when you have money and you're able to give money to everybody, it's fine, but when you don't have money and then you have to start setting priorities, and the temper seem to flare, and things get a little heated. But I think in the end, that it's kind of like the saying, there's two things you shouldn't see made, sausage and laws, and that's kind of the way it is. It's can be a pretty ugly process, but I think all in all, Wyoming's really lucky to have a citizens legislature that meets only 30 days and 40 days, because that really makes us concentrate, get our work done in a lot of hurry, and we can't do that much damage in that short period of time. So.
Mr. McAllister.
What I'd like to see change in our legislature, and the problem I do see, is not enough turnover. It's just ridiculous how difficult it is for new, fresh people to get in there and do something. I'm not talking about myself. I'm actually thinking of other races, 100%. And I'd like to see more turnover. Yes, I think we're very fortunate here. I've lived in other states. I've had experience, just personal experience from being around it, of how candidates run for office in other places and how much more twisted things get, which is about the cleanest word I can come up with. And it doesn't get quite that bad here, which is really nice, and we are really lucky. And we can meet our legislators. We can walk into our governor's office. That's so rare. I don't really know of another state that you can do that, and I don't know if there is another one. We've got a pretty open system of legislators, lawmakers, people we can have access to, but that doesn't mean they need to be there forever. That doesn't mean we need the same person constantly. We're not going to have the same problems constantly, so the same people aren't going to be able to solve different problems over and over. We have to have turnover. We have to have movement Everything else in life moves. Why doesn't the legislature turn over? That's a hard question to answer, but it doesn't as much as it should. That would be the biggest thing I would say that I could say there's a bit of a problem with.
All right, next question. You will begin. Wyoming rates very poorly on the difference in pay for men and women. What can the state do to address this and resulting inequities in household income? And I would also give you the option there to say what, if anything, can the state do?
What the state can do is make sure as the state entity, every state employee is being treated the same. Its own internal system of checks and balances. The state can make sure that they're not pointing their finger at themselves when they're saying there's a problem in how we're equal paying men and women, period. They can deal with it right then and there and make an example, make a start there. Past that, it's difficult. I don't support the idea of any kind of law past what we have now to enforce and tell business people what to do. I firmly believe business works best if it's left as much alone as it can be. They want to make money too. Let them do it. If they can make more money by hiring more people, if they're a production company building, they're going to hire more people, they're going to pay them all to keep them. Leave them be, let them do their thing. I don't support that idea in general. Even as a woman, I don't. But the biggest thing that the state can do is set the example, set the standard. Set the standard of this is how we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, we're going to make sure our state employees are being treated the same, regardless. That's what the state can do.
Mr. Baxter?
Well, I'm not sure the state legislature can do a lot about that, but I think one of the things that we do need to do as an old educator, we need to be gender blind when it comes to encouraging kids to enter certain occupations. And I think the disparity, a lot of it is because of the type of jobs that women have gravitated to as opposed to men. So I think we can do a better job in our educational system to moving our young ladies, and I have 2 daughters, into jobs that are higher paying jobs. And so I think that maybe that's the key to it, maybe starting in our high schools and with our guidance counselors to make our kids understand, young ladies understand that there's no real limitations as to gender and that they can go into any profession that they aspire to. And I think that's become a societal norm now. I don't think we're nearly as divided as we used to be. I think World War II changed all that when Rosie the Riveter took over and we finally decided that women are capable of doing a lot more than we ever anticipated they would do. So having worked my lifetime in an occupation where there isn't a whole lot of difference between men and women, all the salaries are the same, and there's a lot more principals and female principals moving through the system, superintendents. So in fact, a lot of the people I work with on the education committee that are young ladies end up in very good administrative jobs that pay more than I ever made.
All right, next question. Mr. Baxton, you will go first. Do you think the school finance bills passed this year will be workable? If not, what would you suggest to change them?
Well, it's got to be workable. We don't have a choice. You know, because of the lawsuits that we went through with the Campbell decision, the Washington decision, we're mandated by law to fully fund the model, and the model has to be an evidence-based model. And so we don't have a lot of choice. That's the reason we're spending $1.5 billion per biennium or somewhere in that neighborhood on education. Given the current budget situation, I think that we did the best we could possibly do. In fact, we were a lot kinder on the House side than they were on the Senate side. We did end up, I think, making some cuts. It's about as far away from the educational delivery system as we possibly could. If you look at it, we changed some buildings and ground stuff, some transportation stuff. But we tried to do the best job we could of holding the line on salaries and everything else, and keeping our classroom sizes reasonable. So, you know, I don't know that given the circumstances that we have that we could have done a whole lot different. We did discover some funds that we could transfer over to keep from draining our so-called rainy day fund, legislative stabilization reserve fund. And if you look at the numbers at the end of the year, I think we did a pretty good job of being able, with the backfill that we got from our investments and so forth, we did a fairly good job of being able to maintain that $1.5 billion cushion that we're trying to keep in that fund.
I'm not sure if that's going to work, and I don't agree with Jerry that they only cut as far away from as they could. I think they got a little too close for home on education. We spent a lot of money on it here. Something that's incredibly important. There's really nothing more important than our kids. There really isn't. That's what we're trading everything off to. That's what we're building everything for. I don't know if it's going to work and be functional. I don't know if it's going to trigger another lawsuit. We'll have to wait and see. It's not an easy situation to deal with. I will 100% agree the House was kinder than the Senate was on cuts. But I think I think that things maybe could have done a little bit better on that. But I do hope that it functions well and continues to progress in a way that's a problem that can be dealt with without things really blowing up. I hope so. I'm not sure. I honestly don't know.
Bit of a follow-up, I guess, a related question. Ms. McAllister, you addressed this first. Given that we've been talking numerous times here about the importance of local schools in our small communities, how would you deal with the school funding shortfall to help keep these schools open?
Sound like I'm repeating myself. That transparency in budgeting, looking at the budgets, finding out where the needs are, and making sure that every dollar we're spending, we're getting a dollar's return on. Most government programs that deal with taxpayer money, other than education, if you just separate that and you just deal with the fact of dealing with taxpayer money, have to produce over $1 in benefits in every dollar they spend. It's really hard to do with education because you talk about the quality of someone's possibilities when you're talking about their education. That's really hard to do. But I think some effort can be put into it. Analyzing the budget, making sure every penny, every dollar is being spent, and we're getting $1 out of it, whether it be a salary or a building or a groundskeeper or a school bus. We're getting $1 out of the dollar we're spending. The return on investment's coming back in. That makes sense to me. Just endlessly spending money doesn't make sense to me. The transparency is going to help a lot. I think people would be really shocked on how far we could get if everyone could see where everything's going, and we could all sit down and talk about it and get somewhere, and that comes back on education as well. Yes, we have a mandate in our Constitution, we have to fund it 100%. It has to be fair and equal. All things I'm pretty sure everyone would agree with. It's the right thing to do. Yes, we've had lawsuits that also mandate us by law on how to deal with education spending, but we need to deal with it in a transparent way. We need to know where the money's going, what it's being done, and what's coming back from the money that's being spent.
Well, obviously, we don't have an appetite for raising taxes, so we have to live within the budget that we have. And perhaps in the introduction, our candidate for state treasurer hit on a key to that whole thing, and that is to be able to recover more money from our investments. I don't see any other possibility in the near future for us to change an awful lot, except that we have a huge amount of money out there, and to be able to invest that wisely so that it returns as much as we can possibly get out of it is probably about the only thing we have on the horizon right now. We're to the point right now on the cut side of that thing where I would hope that we can hold our own on that. One of the things that we did on the transportation thing and on special ed, I don't think is sustainable over a long period of time. It works for us for right now, and it'll probably get us through through this biennium. But after that, then we're going to have to do something about reconfiguring how we buy buses and those kinds of things. So there's still a lot of work to be done out there, but our best hope is to be able to generate more money with the investments that we have, I think.
All right. Mr. Paxton, this one goes to you first. Do you have any ideas for constitutional amendments that would remove financial burdens to local government?
Remove financial burdens.
Yes.
Well, for one thing, constitutional amendment is pretty hard to pass in the state of Wyoming anyway. But I really can't think of anything that I would say that would change that. I know that we're down to the basics in these small communities where health, safety, and welfare of the people in the communities. I know there's a lot of communities that one of the first things that goes is the law enforcement thing. So I just don't know if any of the burdens that we could do, any kind of a constitutional amendment that we could pass that would remove any of the burdens from local governments.
I honestly can't think of a constitutional amendment as difficult as they are to pass that would really do any benefit. On that question, whomever asked it, I think I'd want to engage in conversation and see if there is a more topic-specific problem that can be dealt with. I'd be curious to get to the root of and the base of what caused that question to be asked in that way, and engage in conversation to work that. But I can't think of a constitutional amendment that would even be practical to move that direction. I don't think you could pass it. I really don't. I think that'd be a tough nut to crack.
All right. Next question, and this is at the request of a couple of folks before we started. As you know, we have it's a little unrelated completely to the House, but we have a we have a specific purpose tax, 6th penny tax. What is your stance on its uses and allocations, if you have? Would you like to go first? Sure. And if you'd like a refresher, here it is. Feel free.
I picked one of those up a while ago.
Okay, all right.
If it passes, where would I like to see it go?
Yes.
I'd like to see some of it saved and invested. I wouldn't like to see it all spent. I don't want to keep taxing everybody an extra penny for special use projects. I don't understand why, when there's a shortfall, a bit of that planning doesn't go into future monies into a savings account and some engine that can make more investment, more money in return on that. That's honestly something I'd like to see put into thought at the beginning of any penny tax, any tax at all, as to how to save some of that money, solve more problems with it. Don't just deal with the today budget problem. Let's look forward a little bit. Honestly, that's what I'd like to see being done.
Well, philosophically, I certainly believe that the best decisions are made closest to where they're implemented, and I think this is a very good example of that. When you look at all the great projects that have happened because of these projects that we've had around the state, I think that there's been an enormous impact on it, and the fact that it's locally controlled, local folks decide what they want, they go for it, they have the control over whether or not they pass it. That's the kind of things I like. I like that local control, the local projects. They're going to do the most good for the community. That I like the decision process to be is made at the local level as far as we can. The more decisions we make in Cheyenne or Washington, D.C., the worse decisions they are.
The next one I'm editing just a little bit, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as well. Mr. Paxton, you go first. Discuss your thoughts on the world needs more cowboys.
You want to open that can of worms, huh?
I almost went, ha, you had to go first. And then I went, Julie, that's immature, don't. Then I did it anyway.
Well, you know, I think from the perspective of the state legislature, I think, you know, we sometimes get into the micromanagement side of things a little bit too much. And from my standpoint, you know, regardless of what your perception is on that, that was a decision that was made at the university level, and I certainly wouldn't want to second guess that thing. And to be honest with you, I really kind of like it, and I don't care who else has got it. I mean, it doesn't make any difference to me. I was raised in the cowboy culture. I've spent most of a good share of my life horseback, and so I think we do need more cowboys. So I don't, you know, I don't have a problem with other people utilizing that thing too. I trust the university in making the right decisions. So.
The first news article I read about this just pretty much said, offensive University of Wyoming slogan causes uproar. And I was like, oh gosh, what'd they do? And I read the slogan, like, huh? I don't understand why everyone's upset about it. Although there is a nugget in there I'm not too happy about. It's the amount of money they paid another firm to come up with the idea. That's a waste of money. I'm not gonna pay someone else to come up with a slogan, I'm not quite sure why that was done. But again, I'll agree with Jerry on the fact of the matter that the university decided to do it and it's their decision. But I do personally like it as well. It didn't knee-jerk in as to why anyone would find that offensive, because anyone's a cowboy. Which means you're out there doing it. I don't understand why that means anyone couldn't do it. That's your own personal perception. That's not spoken in this slogan. That's inside someone's mind.
Okay. All right, we're down to 2, which is good because we're getting down to the last 20 minutes or so here.
We have 10 minutes left on the camera, too.
Oh, good Lord. Okay, we really only have 10 minutes then. All right. So, Ms. McAllister, first addressed by you. If elected, what are your top 2 priorities for legislative action?
Top 2 priorities, transparency and budgeting. I cannot stress that enough. I don't understand why it's 2018 and we don't have it. It's ridiculous. That's 1, period. Bottom line. 2, preserving what we have that makes us all love Wyoming, but making sure it's going to be here in the future. And I know that's a huge one, but it's the only way I can sum it up into 2 things.
Well, I guess it's probably no surprise that my top priority would be to continue to be able to fund education adequately and hopefully to increase that funding over a period of time so that we can do the cost of living things and all the things that we need to be doing along that line. So that has to be my top priority. And I think just finding better ways to be efficient in state government is probably, as that process continues, we find more and more ways that we can do that. Our agencies have done a lot of cross-training now, and I think that's a good thing, so that you know, that there's kind of an ebb and flow to most of their state agencies, and there are times when there's a certain segment of that might be really busy, and then there's times when another segment may be really busy. And so I think that whole business of cross-training is a great thing that we're seeing take place, and so I'd like to see us continue that, continue to look for other efficiencies.
Well, now I have 3 questions. They multiply. So, Mr. Paxton, first to you. We know more and more of our Medicaid budget is going to long-term care for elderly and the disabled. Our population continues to age and the needs will be even more, they will grow. How will we deal with these priorities and needs?
Well, there's so much uncertainty with the Affordable Care Act on the national scene that it makes it really difficult as a state to try to make any long-term decisions on which way we go with that. And so the jury is really out on that. I think that a lot of if we're going to maintain the status quo that we have right now with the Affordable Care Act, we're down to 1 provider in the state of Wyoming right now. It's a huge burden on our budget if you look at how much money we're spending and taking care of our elderly and disabled folks. It's an enormous amount of money. I don't know where we go from here until we see what they do on the federal level with the Affordable Care Act. Maybe that'll give us some ideas and some solutions moving forward.
There's so much uncertainty with what's going to go on with Medicare and Medicaid right now and how we're going to deal with that as a state. I'm going to focus on, I kind of say as a bit of a 2-part question, how we're going to deal with our growing needs of our elderly and disabled communities, which is an incredibly important issue to me. My husband's disabled. He broke his neck at work in 2012 and changed everything for us. And I had always been focused on healthcare, focused on how important it was until I had to live it and went, wow, I wasn't focused nearly enough. There's a lot of areas we can improve on and a lot of things that we should be doing as a state, as a community, as a county in every way, shape, and form to deal with the disabled and elderly community in a better, more ethical way. One thing we need to utilize more is telehealth. It's a fantastic way for preventative health care. Refill of medications, just that alone, not having to have someone travel, can increase their independence, maybe just enough where they can stay at home instead of having to be in a care facility. Focusing on keeping ways to keep people home. They live and work here their entire lives and pay taxes, and we're going to justify them having to go to a home a moment sooner than their medical necessity makes it an absolute life or death reason. That's not right. It's unethical. We're not doing anything about it. It's ridiculous. The small clinics, we have one in Medicine, though most of the town utilizes it here. Keeping those open, keeping them funded, and making sure they're a resource for the people who live in these small towns. Just because you live in a small town doesn't mean you should have to trade off your health and your long-term health for living. And that's a trade-off a lot of people have to make. To find a specialist, you're lucky if you can find one in Cheyenne. But you're probably gonna have to cross state lines and go to Colorado. We don't have them here. A single solution to that cannot be discussed in 90 seconds, and now I have to stop.
These are really good and complex questions.
They are.
So. All right. Ms. McAllister, a recent YSAC survey had results that said many folks were in favor of increasing taxes to fund education. How could the legislature use these results to possibly redirect some education funding sources and add some tax revenue?
It's a very hypothetical question. I don't think they should be raising taxes right now. I know I'm beating the bush. We need to come back to transparency and looking at our budgeting. If they were to do it, and I had no say in pulling it, even though I'd be screaming, saying no, don't do that, how could they use them for education? I'm going to come back to the same thing on the penny and the last thing I said about taxes. Why aren't we saving some of the money? If we're looking at temporary tax increases or permanent tax increases, why are we spending all or most of it? That does not make sense to me. If you get a raise at work, do you spend every penny of that raise for the rest of your life? No. Not if you want to retire or get anywhere financially. You save some of it, you invest some of it. So if it were to happen, which would, even if it happened in front of me, I'd be screaming to stop it. Then I think that some of that tax money needs to be saved so we can live the highest quality of life we possibly can, regardless of our income levels and regardless of what percentage in tax we're having to pay. Why aren't we saving some of it to solve other problems? That doesn't make sense.
Well, you know, it's interesting how you phrase a survey. You can predetermine some of the results sometimes from that. And from what I've seen of that survey, the further away from your own pocket that you get, the more likely you are to support a tax. If we're taxing wind, if we're taxing the mineral extraction industry, whatever we're taxing, as long as it's not coming out of my pocket, it's fine. But what happened, you know, if that survey would have said, would you be willing to support a state income tax to support education, then it would have had some credibility with me. But when you ask people, are you willing to have somebody else pay a higher price to educate your kids? Of course I am. But how much more are you willing to pay? If you would restructure that survey in such a manner as to say, you know, would you be willing to pay an extra 2 cents sales tax on everything you purchase? Would you be willing to do the state income tax? I think the end results might have been a little bit different.
All right, since Mrs. Simpson is almost out of tape, I will ask one concluding question. What is, and Mr. Paxton, you should go first. What's the one thing you want folks in this room to know about you and your potential or actual service to this district in closing?
Well, I think probably the thing I'd like to have people know is that over the past 6 years, I've worn out about 3 cars covering my district, and you have to remember that in Wyoming, the way our state legislature is set up, you get $750 per quarter to do constituency work, and that works for if you have 1.6 square miles in the middle of Cheyenne, or if you have 12,118 square miles in House District 47. So it takes some real dedication to travel around and meet with people and do those, and I think that's been my strength in being able to, because I am retired, and I enjoy going to the different communities, and I've gotten to know a lot of people. I think that's probably my strongest point is to, you know, my job in the state legislature is not to represent my viewpoints on all the issues, but to try to do the best job I can of voting in a manner that I think is what the majority of the people in my district would want me to vote. So sometimes you have to put aside a little bit of your own personal belief system and your own prejudices so that you can do a better job of representing a wide range of people that we have. Fortunately, most of them are small town people, so we all think kind of the same, so there's not a real diversity of thought. Pretty conservative group from one end of the district to the other.
In closing, one, fantastic questions, guys. I do want to say that actually on the record, not just an offhand comment. The biggest thing for me, if it was me voting for me or me trying to convince me to vote for me, very poorly worded sentence a couple of ways, I care about this. I truly care about this state and the people who live here. I care about what happens to them. I care about the quality of life that we have. I care about what's going to happen to our kids. I care about what's going on right now. I will work harder than anyone else in there. Just give me a chance to do it. I'm not going to back away from a problem. I'm not going to back away from a situation. You've already seen it tonight. If I don't know, I'll admit I don't know, even if it makes me look silly, because I'd rather have someone tell me the truth than just talk and blow smoke up my butt. It's not fair. It's not the way we deal with each other on a human level. I'll bring that to politics. I'll bring that to the job. I'll give it full time. I'll give it everything I need, even if that means compromising and learning. In fact, hopefully it will mean compromising and learning, because that means we'll be getting somewhere. We need to be proactive in what we're doing. We need to deal with our future. Could this cause a problem? Is this starting to cause a problem and moving forward? And we need someone who's going to really work hard to find the answers to problems, to find the solutions. Whether it's a compromise or swinging totally the opposite way of what we thought going in, we're going to have to do the work if we still want to be here in another 100 years. We have to. If we want any resemblance of today, we have to start now. We have to. We can't keep waiting. We just can't.
Speak again as from the League of Women Voters, Cheryl Laramie. First, thank you both. You've given us a wonderful night. Moderator, thank you for coming this way.
Thank you.